Hello everyone, this is Dr. Swapna, working as the Associate Professor in PG and Research Department of Management Studies at Hindustan College of Arts and Science. It's really nice to meet you all in this particular session. Let me give a small intro about myself. I have gained nearly 17 years of professional experience in the field of education, and I've been in contact with both the UG and PG students in the discipline of management. And apart from that, I have contributed to the development of the students community in inculcating the entrepreneurial spirit and talent within themselves. And today we'll be dealing with a very interesting topic, that is research process. I'll be meeting you in this particular session. Thank you.
So, very good morning. So, this is the topic which we will be discussing for today, that is research process. So, research process is a very important area because we should be aware about how the research has to be carried out. So, then the next slide we'll be discussing some basic informations about what is this research and what are the definitions given by certain authors with regarding to research. So, with the meaning of research, we can understand from the terminology it is nothing but searching for knowledge, and it is a systematic search for the information regarding a particular topic, and it's basically a systematic method of finding a solution to a problem in any kind of research that you're going to undertake. And with regarding to the definition, according to Clifford Woody, research comprises of defining and redefining the problems, formulating the hypothesis, collecting the data, organizing it, evaluating the data, and reaching conclusions for the research activity, whatever you are undertaking. In the next slide, if you could see, we will be discussing the important steps that you have to take into consideration when you are undertaking the research. So it goes about the formulating the research problem, extensive literature survey, developing the working hypothesis, preparing the research design, determining the sample design, collecting the data, execution of the project, analysis of the data, hypothesis testing, generalizations and interpretations, and then preparations of the report or the thesis. The first step in the research process is nothing but formulating the research problem. So, the base for any kind of research, whenever you are and selecting, you have to identify the exact problem, what has given rise to this particular research activity. So you decide the area of interest and then you state the problem in a general way. And once a statement is mentioned in the general way, you try to find out the ambiguities or the doubts that can be raised with regarding to the particular statement when you are giving the problem, and then you can rephrase the problem into a more specific manner. So understand the problem and try to rephrase the statement in a more specific way. It speaks about the how the research problem can be formulated. So here I have given an example with regarding to why the productivity in Japan has so much higher than in India. So this particular statement is generally stated, and there can be several doubts and ambiguities that has arisen in this particular topic. So what is the productivity that we are talking, and which category of industry do this particular statement is reflecting, and what is the period or the time frame that has been implemented with regarding to the research activity. So all these questions are not answered in this statement. So if you could rephrase the statement, you can just write like this: what are the factors that were responsible for the higher labor productivity of Japan's manufacturing industries during the decade 1971 to 1980 related to India's manufacturing industries? So, the formulation of the research problem is the base for any research activity. Unless otherwise you are clear and thorough about your research problem, you cannot further go about with the next process. So, the next slide we will be discussing about the second step, that is your extensive literature survey. Extensive literature survey is one particular area where you can get so many sources in order to frame a particular topic as your research. So in the extensive literature survey, the sources which is available for helping the researcher in framing the in identifying the area or in identifying a particular topic is through the academic journals. You have conference proceedings where the articles and papers are published in the conference proceedings, and you have government reports, the RBI bulletins, the economic surveys, and magazines are also available in helping you in supporting in framing the topic for your research. In the next slide, we'll have the third step, that is developing the working hypothesis. So working hypothesis is basically an assumption. It is a tentative assumption, like whether the statement will be accepted or it is going to be rejected. The based on the problem, based on the objective of your research, you will be framing the working hypothesis. And this hypothesis, by applying the statistical tools, you will be accepting the hypothesis and or you will be rejecting the concerned hypothesis. So you should be very specific when you are framing the hypothesis. And you should also collect lots of data, and the data that will be required for analyzing the hypothesis is very important. The next slide, we are moving to the fourth step in our research process, that is preparing the research design. So research design is a conceptual framework or the outline, or we call it as a blueprint as to how the research can be carried out. So when you have identified the problem, you should frame the research design in a very effective way. So in that outline, it consists of where to conduct the study, the type of data that will be required for analyzing your research, the period of study, the sample design. Sample design is the technique that you will be following in selecting the samples. And after the samples is identified, you have to have a methodology in collecting the data. So these are the things that is covered in the research design process. The next slide, we'll be discussing about how the sample design, how to determine the sample design. So as I told you, samples are basically drawn from a specific universe, and this sample design is one methodology. It will be helping us to identify the samples or select the samples in a better way. There are two different methods which is adopted in selecting the samples. One is the probability sampling technique, and the other one is the non-probability sampling technique. The next slide, we'll discuss about the types of probability sample. So what is this probability sample? Probability sampling is a method where every unit in the population, it has an equal chance for being selected as a sample unit. So in the probability sampling technique, you have simple random sampling, stratified systematic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster area sampling, and then multi-stage sampling. The next slide, we will discuss about the non-probability sampling methods. So non-probability sampling method is one particular method where the units in the population, they have an equal, they have an unequal or a zero chance for being selected as a sample unit. And there are different methods which is followed in the non-probability sampling method: convenience sampling, judgment sampling, quota sampling, and sequential sampling. These are the methods which is adopted by the researchers in carrying out their research activities. The next slide, it's a very important area. We are discussing about the data collection here, because once the samples are identified, you have to take a questionnaire, you have to prepare a questionnaire, or you have to collect the data from those samples. So there are two methods in the data collection. One is the primary data, and the other one is the secondary data. So primary data is the initial data, the fresh data that will be collected from the respondents. And this data can be done, or this data can be collected through conducting experiments or through surveys. So the survey methodology can be conducted through five types. One is the observation method, or the second one is the interview method, the direct interview method, face to face, where you meet the respondent and you are collecting the data from him. The third one is your telephone interview method. So through telephone, making a call to the respondent and collecting the data from him. Questionnaire is preparing a structured questionnaire, putting all the informations about the topic, whatever you want to ask from the respondents. You can just give the personal profile, you can give the factors that is influencing the customer to buy the product. So if it is a brand preference study, so you have to mention the different types of brands in the questionnaire, how they will be, on what basis they'll be buying those brands. All these questions can be raised in the questionnaire, and either this questionnaires can be mailed to the concerned respondent. If you have their mail id, you can get the responses filled, and you can ask the respondents to send the questionnaires once it is filled to the concerned researcher. And the another important, when it comes to the mass research work, when the number of respondents is more in number, this particular methodology is very much implemented. That is, the questionnaire method is implemented in a very effective manner comparing to all other methods, because this interview, personal interview, and the other methods, the researcher he himself has to go directly to the respondent, and he has to observe certain things. If he want to get some data about the respondent's purchasing behavior, he has to observe by standing, say for example, by standing in the retail outlet, he has to observe what are the products the customer is preferring and willing to purchase. But it is not so in the case of the questionnaire method. You can give some time to the respondents to fill the questionnaire, and later on also you can go collect it from them. And then the next one is your scheduling method. Scheduling method is especially adopted in the census collection data, where you have certain enumerators. Some people will be appointed for collecting the census data from each and every household. So they come to each and every household, and they'll be inquiring about the number of about the family members in that particular house, and they'll be inquiring whether the names of the people are correct. So this is the scheduling method, where the respondent is not filling the data all alone by himself, but it is the enumerator who will be appointed by the government, and they will be coming to each and every household and collect the data all alone by themselves. So this is very important. In data collection is one of the very important methodology that will be adopted in the research activity. The next slide, it speaks about the execution of the project. So in this execution part, if it is a structured questionnaire, or the structured questionnaires are basically used in the surveys. So the data is collected. When the data is collected, you can just you can upload the information. So when the data is machine processed, data is basically, it will be coded. Code values will be given to each and every questions that you have posted. Say for example, the gender, male and female is to be given a tick mark. So for the male, you can give a code value as 1, and for the female, you can give the code value as 2. So when the values, the data, when it has been converted into code values, it will be easy for the computer to process it, and it will be giving us the results. Especially SPSS is one particular software which is helping us to give the results in a very effective way when you are giving the coded values for each and every questions that you have raised in the study. The next slide, we are having the analysis of data and the hypothesis testing. So the analysis part, you have to classify the raw data. When you are doing the classification of the raw data, it can be either, there are three methods that is adopted in classifying the data. One is coding, and then you have editing and tabulation. So coding is, the data has to be tabulated and it has to be counted. As I told you, one is mentioned for male and two is for female. Similarly, for almost all the questions, whatever you have given with options, each and every option has to be given a coded value. And then you have the editing activity. So editing is wherever the entry has been gone wrong, or the blank responses are given, the data is not it is not fulfilled. So you have to see that almost all the entries have been properly made in the questions, whatever you are collecting from the respondents. And then you have the tabulation. So the data has to be, finally whatever data has been collected, it has to be tabulated in tables. The tables basically, it consists of rows and columns, and you are giving a more specification with regarding to what is the age group, or how many respondents are belonging to a particular age group, and how many respondents are belonging to a particular income group, how many of them are belonging to the occupation. So you give a specification in the tables. And finally, when you are analyzing the data, you are using the statistical techniques, like you have the chi-square test, you have the ANOVA, you have the t-test, you have the f-test, you have the z-test, you have the descriptive statistics test. So all these types of tests is utilized for getting the perfect results. And in the ninth process, you have the hypothesis testing. So hypothesis is an assumption, as I told you. So the statement has to be accepted or rejected, and depends upon the results after our statistical analysis. The next slide, we have generalizations and interpretations. So the data has to be, once the hypothesis is used in the study, then testing the hypothesis and arriving at generalizations or building a theory is very important. For example, there is no significant relationship between the age and the use of cosmetics. So, two important factors are taken into consideration. The variables, that is the dependent variable and the independent variable, is taken here into consideration, and we want to find out the relationship between these two variables. So there is no generalizations, but if there is no hypothesis, then you have to explain the findings using some theory, and this is the interpretation. So each and every table has to be explained, or it has to be interpreted based on the results or the informations whatever we have derived. And in the last slide, we have the preparation of the report or the thesis. So as I told you, each and every research work, it has to be it will be getting a permanent nature only it is put into papers. So finally the researcher has to write a report of whatever work he has done, what was his results, what was his objectives, what were his major findings in that particular study. It has to be converted in the form of a report. So the report should be written in a simple language, okay. And it consists of certain charts. You can utilize certain charts and illustrations in preparing the reports, and whatever problems has been encountered while conducting the research, it should be reported in a very effective way. And these are the important steps when you are preparing the report. So we call it as the layout of the report. One is the preliminary pages. The preliminary pages are basically the first few pages that is to be present in any report. Like it can be the title, it can be the cover page, it can be the acknowledgement, it can be the preface. All these important elements, the certificate pages, all these pages are very important for any report. The main text, then you have the main text and you have the end matter. So in the next slide, if you could see, I have mentioned what are the important contents in the preliminary pages. So the title and date, you have the acknowledgement, the forward thanking, you have the table of contents, you have the table of charts, table of the list of tables, list of graphs and charts. All these things are covered in the preliminary pages. And the next slide, you could see the main text. The main important part of the research activity is mentioned here in the form of a report, which starts with the introduction. In the introductory note, you have the objectives, you have the methodologies, you have the scope, you have the limitations of the study, and finally you have the summary of the findings. And the last slide, with regarding to the end matter, you should be very much thorough with regarding to the bibliographies and the appendices. Basically, in the bibliography, we'll be mentioning the list of books, the journals, the reports, the references, especially whatever we have collected for the purpose of that particular research is being highlighted in the bibliography part. And in the appendix page, we will be mentioning, we'll be utilizing the questionnaire that was used as an instrument for collecting the data.
To conclude with this topic, let us have a small summarization with regarding to the headings what we have discussed. We have seen the meaning of what is research, what is the definition. We have seen the important steps or the processes how the research will go about. Hope it was useful to you. Thank you.